Something huge just happened in Chicago Fire Season 14, Episode 16, and a lot of fans almost missed it. At first glance, Firehouse 66 feels like a smaller episode. Half the crew is missing. The firehouse feels quiet, and the story seems like something we've seen before. But underneath all that, something major is happening. Because this episode quietly reveals Kelly Severide's true future in Chicago Fire, not just as squad leader, but as the next leader of Firehouse 51. And once you notice the clues the writers planted, you realize this episode is actually setting up one of the biggest character shifts the show has done in years. So today, we're breaking down everything that happened in episode 16, the hidden meaning behind Severide's story, Lucy's surprising backstory, and the real reason Chief Hopkins might become one of the most dangerous enemies Firehouse 51 has ever faced. Part 1. Why this episode feels different. Right away, something about this episode feels unusual. Most of Firehouse 51 isn't there. The show explains that many of the firefighters are away in Colorado for training, leaving only Squad 3 and a few others behind. But this changes the entire feel of the episode. Instead of the usual ensemble story, this suddenly becomes a Severide-focused episode. And honestly, that works perfectly for where his character is right now. Because after 14 seasons, Severide is standing at a crossroads. For years, he was known as the loose cannon of Firehouse 51. When Chicago Fire started, he was the complete opposite of Matt Casey. Casey was calm, responsible, a natural leader. Severide, he was reckless, emotional, sometimes self-destructive. Fans remember the mistakes, the impulsive decisions, the dangerous risks, and of course, the infamous Vegas wedding. Back then, the idea of Severide running an entire firehouse would have sounded crazy, but 14 seasons later, that possibility suddenly feels very real. Part 2. The real purpose of Chief Hopkins. Enter Battalion Chief Hopkins. And if you've watched Chicago Fire long enough, you probably recognize the setup immediately. Every once in a while, the show introduces an outsider who believes Firehouse 51 does things the wrong way. Hopkins arrives with that exact energy. He questions their leadership, he criticizes their methods, and almost immediately, he targets Severide. At first, it feels like standard TV conflict. But then we learn the real reason. Hopkins' problem isn't actually with Kelly, it's with Benny Severide. Years ago, Kelly's father suspended Hopkins during his career in the CFD, and Hopkins never let it go. He carried that resentment for years, building his entire perspective around the belief that the old generation of firefighters, people like Benny, were flawed leaders. Now that Hopkins has power, he believes it's his job to correct those mistakes. And in his mind, Kelly Severide represents everything he hates about that era. But here's the twist. Hopkins is completely wrong about Kelly. Part 3, the moment Severide changes. For most of this season, Severide has been stepping closer to leadership. He passed the captain's exam. He's taken on more responsibility. But it always felt like something that just happened naturally, not something he truly chased. Until this episode. Because Hopkins challenging him changes everything. Instead of reacting emotionally the way the younger Severide might have, he does something different. He starts investigating, he researches Hopkins, he studies the situation, he plays it smart, and that moment reveals something important. Severide isn't just reacting anymore, he's thinking like a leader. By the end of the episode, his mentor Chief Van Meter basically confirms it. Severide isn't just capable of leading a squad. He might be exactly the person Firehouse 51 needs to run the entire house. And for the first time, Severide realizes he actually wants that. Part 4, Lucy's emotional backstory. While Severide drives the main story, another character gets one of the episode's most emotional moments. Lucy. Fans have liked Lucy since she joined the show, but this episode finally reveals why she became a firefighter. And it's not what many people expected. Before joining the CFD, Lucy made a terrible mistake. She was involved in a drunk driving accident. An accident so severe that she almost lost her arm. That moment completely changed her life. Instead of letting the mistake define her, she decided to dedicate her life to helping others. Becoming a firefighter was her way of making things right. It's a powerful redemption story. But the episode takes a darker turn when Hopkins uses that past against her. He was involved in that original call, and he uses the information as leverage, essentially forcing Lucy to work under his authority instead of Firehouse 51. It's a move that instantly makes Hopkins feel less like a strict leader, and more like someone willing to manipulate people to get what he wants, which raises a big question for the rest of the season. How far is Hopkins willing to go? Part 5, the cruise moment fans are talking about. Meanwhile, Joe Cruz delivers one of the most emotional moments in the episode. Cruz has news, big news. He and Chloe are expecting another baby, but Cruz hesitates before telling Severide because he knows something the audience hasn't forgotten. Severide and Stella recently lost their baby. That pain hasn't disappeared, so Cruz worries that sharing his happiness might hurt his friend. But Severide's reaction shows just how much he has grown over the years. Instead of sadness or resentment, he's genuinely happy for Cruz, because that's who Severide has become. Someone who celebrates his friends even while carrying his own pain. Still, the episode quietly reminds us of something important. Severide still wants a family, and that dream is still unfinished. Knocked Part 6, The Future of Firehouse 51. When you step back and look at the entire episode, the message becomes clear. This wasn't just a random filler episode. It was a setup for a conflict between Severide and Hopkins, a setup for Lucy's storyline, and most importantly, a setup for Severide's future. Because after 14 seasons, Chicago Fire is entering a new era. The characters who started as young firefighters are slowly becoming the leaders of the next generation. And Severide may be the one destined to take the biggest step of all, from reckless lieutenant to the man in charge of Firehouse 51. But if Hopkins thinks Severide is just Benny Severide's son, he's about to learn something the hard way. Kelly Severide isn't his father, and a man who finally knows what he wants is a very dangerous opponent, outrow. But here's the real question. Is Hopkins just a temporary obstacle, or is he about to become one of the biggest villains Chicago Fire has introduced in years? And, more importantly, are we finally seeing the beginning of Captain Severide leading Firehouse 51? Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you enjoy deep breakdowns of Chicago Fire like this one, make sure to like the video and subscribe, because the next few episodes might completely change the future of Firehouse 51.